And if I may now, I thought we might start with each speaker taking 5 to 7 minutes for their own opening positions and opening remarks, and we take it from there. May I first invite Ambassador Varma to speak? Right.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the Justice Ajay Tripathi Foundation for this great honor and privilege accorded to me to be a speaker today. I knew, if I may call him not Justice Tripathi, but Ajay, quite well in the days when I was more in Patna as advisor to the Chief Minister. And I found him to have an exceptional mind with insight and clarity and a formidable reputation as a judge at a very young age. Alka ji and he were often excellent hosts to us at their home, and we would spend the evening speaking of many issues of national importance on which he had an opinion. And later when he became Chief Justice of Chhattisgarh and I joined the Rajya, we somewhat did not remain that much closely in touch, but always I held him in very high respect, and it's one of the great ironies and tragedies of life that a passing crisis took away so many permanently important people, and one of them was Justice Tripathi. So I begin by paying my very humble tribute to him and to his memory. I think the subject before us is an important one which needs to have been discussed in detail much earlier and continuously. The founding fathers of our Constitution decided that India will be a republic and a parliamentary democracy, and wrote an admirable constitution whose fundamental pillars were to maintain this edifice of democracy on what have been called the the triangular separation of powers between the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. But constitutions are not a theoretical construct only. They are important because that provides the foundational framework. The real test lies when that theoretical construct is tested in real life, in practice. And there we have found that there has been considerable and very regrettable erosion of what was theoretically a sound system of separation of powers. So since this is an opening remark, let me just quickly touch upon some of the concerns that I have. The executive, for instance, and I will first talk of the bureaucracy. There was a time, and I recall my own father who was in the bureaucracy in the ICS, where officers lived up to what Sardar Patel called the steel frame of India, where they had the courage and the courage of conviction and the resolve to tell their political masters where the red line needs to be drawn. And that served in a way a check to the representatives of the legislature, and also acted as a role model for those in the executive who were tasked to implement what governments decided to be their agenda, people's agenda. Over time, I can say this both as a former bureaucrat, that steel frame has alas become a plasticine meltdown. What you see is that bureaucrats, instead of taking a stand, have surprised politicians. Earlier, a bureaucrat would say, this is not allowed according to the rules, and if you wish to proceed, please put your orders in writing. In due course, bureaucrats, before the politician could ask, would say, आप बताइए तो हुजूर करना क्या है? वो तो हम कर देंगे. Because somewhere the ethical framework lost itself on the altar of personal dividends, to the point where today we actually see a happy condominium between bureaucrats and politicians, thereby blurring the line of the separation of powers. I call it a collusion where the executive's role and the legislature's self-willed agenda have, in a sense, combined to create a monopoly of power which has become more and more difficult to challenge in real life. Both feed into each other. As far as the legislature is concerned, Shahrukh ji mentioned about majoritarianism. That has many connotations, but I will talk of a situation, for instance, and we are sitting here with very, very eminent jurists, and although I did law as a student, I have never practiced, so my temerity may be pardoned if I speak on the subject. But there have been situations when a political party has, by the will of the people, a resounding majority in parliament. And often, more or less sustainable majority in the upper house as well. And laws can be passed which normally should have been discussed in greater detail within the legislative infrastructure, and equally there have been attempts to, in a way, circumscribe the role of the opposition by deeming certain bills which in my view do not fall in the purview as money bills, which don't require the approval of the upper house. And so we have situations, and it's not about this government or that. We have a situation where, for instance, a particular judgment is given in the Shah Bano case. It is overruled by an ordinance because of the majority in parliament. So lastly, I'm finishing. I'm a very disciplined speaker.
My only role today is of timekeeper, sir.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
You can look at your watch, I'll take 1 minute more. So, there are unethical coalitions or there are majoritarian legislatures. And that does not, and the absence often of a level playing field. And finally, as far as the judiciary is concerned, for which otherwise I have great respect, there is a question on the independence of the judiciary. If chief justices are given plum assignments after retirement, and it's not happened in one regime or the other, there is reason to raise the question on their judicial independence. If there is a situation of judicial overreach, it's because the executive has failed. Today we have the judiciary literally deciding how many times in the day garbage must be picked up in a particular locality because somebody has filed a PIL and the executive is not doing its work. That's not the job of the judiciary. There are PILs waiting on very important matters. Recently, the question of the electoral bonds, it took 8 years to decide. Democracy is a basic structure of the Constitution. So, these are factors that worry me. And lastly, the erosion of the independence of certain institutions which underpin the separation of powers. I will have occasion to speak of that later. But without the independence of these institutions, I'm sorry, the separation of powers within an effective democracy cannot work. So I'll end at this stage by just a couplet by Faiz कि दिल से तो हर मुआमला करके चले थे साफ हम, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन लिखने वाले, दिल से तो हर मुआमला करके चले थे साफ हम, कहने में उनके सामने बात बदल गई. थैंक यू.